Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine and the beginning of the end of religions. And this new series, the Coherent Bible. Last we left off, and we're going to pick it right back up. We were at Genesis and 131. We just finished 130. So for those who haven't seen much of this is a hyperliteral translation of the most original text that is the most confirmed and is most accepted by scholarship, both secular and theologian. And here we go. And archangels saw everything that angels had created and beheld it as very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth chronicled. Of course, this evening and morning is time frames. There's nothing necessitating in the word day that it be a 24-hour earth day. Thus, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. So a little bit of observation about this phrase here. Christians want to claim, peace and respect to Kevin Chaos. Christians want to claim that God rested from this earth. They want to simultaneously claim that God works with man and always had and always will. But the problem with that is that we are part of the creation of God, being literal offspring. So then if we're not perfect and the text claims that we are not, and there's something more to do for us, namely to quicken us, that is to say, perfect us in our vessel in heaven, then obviously God is not done working with us, in which case he's not resting from us. Sometimes I've presented this and people get confused and think that I'm saying that God never did rest. That's not what I'd said. What I'd said was God has not rested from this earth. So if there is a claim that God has rested, and there is, it cannot be resting from us, part of this creation. And I'll read, in case this print is too small, the comment as I actually wrote it before. Mankind is on this earth and part of the creation of God. If we're finished now, then God has nothing to offer us. If we are part of all the host of them, and if God has in our future to quicken and to perfect us, then we cannot be finished. And thereby, Jehovah cannot be resting from this earth. After all, it is true that the story promises future work done to this earth and to us. Thus, the Sabbath day of God's rest of this earth is not yet. And on the seventh day, angels entered their work, which they had created. And what is demanded by Jehovah rested on the seventh day from all the work which was made. And angels blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it they had rested from all the work that angels had done to reform and repurpose. The word angels there, I am translating that from the word Elohim. There is the Hebrew word Eloah, which means a singular powerful being. Elohim, that "im" right there, means multiple powerful being. So positive multiple powerful beings, angels. 135. These were the generations of the heavens and the earth when it was repurposed, in the time that Jehovah's angels reformed this earth and the sky. And angels had maintained every wild plant of the wilderness before it was in this earth, and every cultivated herb of the field before it grew. For the Jehovah angels had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and not a man to till the ground. Genesis 2:5, which the topic didn't change, so I really want to call it 136, but there's a direct claim of angels or Elohim having possession of physical plants. I think most of us maintain that plants are not spiritual things. Even if they have some kind of consciousness, that doesn't make them spiritual necessarily. And I think it can't be reasonably argued for that there is a spirit tomato. And angel-gathered gases had reacted with existent gases and mixed, making a viable and perfected atmosphere of everything present, and affirmed an earth for Adam. Adam meaning red in the face, or the animal that turns red in the face, that being human beings. I found it that the translation in English was so surprisingly poor, where most translations stay generally to the idea, that I thought I should leave you the actual etymology and the definitions of the original words. These are the actual words, only written in English as they appear in the lexicon. Gathered vapor, burned. I wrote that as reacted. Gathered vapor, mixed, existent. Perfected everything presented, firm red clay face. So I think it's so shockingly bad, Genesis 2:6, that I would present that to you. Read them again if you like. That is the actual meanings of the actual words. Never mind what it says in the King James. I find that quite irrelevant and misleading. If I didn't tarry on that long enough, please just pause the video and you catch up later if you like. Genesis 2, which starts at 2:18, weirdly enough, the origins of mankind. Now, I think the word creation of man and woman, the word creation right there is a little bit misleading, which is why I'm not inclined to use that. After all, these are not part of the original text anyway, and it's just what the translators thought of that part of the text within their presupposed reading frame. So the following will begin to explain the false claim of right, that is right to us, that Satan asserts over the man Adam and the woman Eve. And yes, it says evil God here. It actually does, from the originals. And indeed, that all of us, human beings on this planet, are descendants of the Father and his woman, the mother, and why this war of tyranny versus autonomy exists. Talking about good and evil, talking about El Shaitan and Yahovah in this eternal war, and why the war exists. Perhaps I could subtitle this "Why There's a War," or something that means something like that. Spake ancient, existent, covetous, false gods, and said, "It is not advantageous that Adam be alone. I will make Adam a helpmeet for the reason of his emotions." I think I went over that. Yes. Later in the text is going to be clarity why the name red face, and go into great detail about it in the life and times of Moses. And out of natural animals, the ancient, extant, covetous, false gods had, plural, had formed every wild animal and every fowl of the air, and gave some of each to Adam with some reservations, reluctantly, for him to encounter. And the emotional animal Adam, whatever Adam called every living creature he obtained, that was the name of them. They're now in his possession, and he was going to name them according to as he liked, of course, because now they're his. And Adam gave names to all herd animals and the fowl of the air and to every wild animal. And Adam found them sufficient to help accomplish his purposes, which we'll find out later what his purposes are. And ancient, extant, covetous, false gods caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and while under anesthetic, took from one of Adam's ribs and closed up the flesh exposed there. And from the rib material, which ancient, extant, covetous, false gods had taken from the emotional animal, developed them a woman, and in due time introduced her to the man. If this seems like medically impossible to you, please go look up spiny rat, because more than 20 years ago, we took completely male DNA and we made a female rat that the original male that it came from was able to mate with and produce viable, healthy offspring. So this is one of the reasons I'm saying this is only talking about technology. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken out of man." So I think there's a lot of extra emphasis here to express that Adam and Eve were the same and everything around them is very different. And I point out that human ribs are fairly superficial and do contain stem cells. If your science was good enough, you could take just a sampling from a rib and recreate that being or an equivalent female. Therefore, will a human leave his sire and dam? That's what it actually reads. Not mom and dad, sire and dam. And shall hold fast to his wife, for they are the same flesh. That is to say, Adam is the same as Eve, but not the same as Adam's sire and dam. A different kind of animal, and that's going to be explained in the story of Moses. This suggests implicitly that others like Adam are about to be born by gestational non-genetic mothers, and why the father of all and the mother of all had no father, no mother, and no lineage, as the Bible claims. So that makes perfect sense to me. How long have we been going here? Only about 15 minutes. Good. Okay. So I'll start into the next one. Let me check with any comments you guys have made and see if... Oh, Peace and Respect Junk Shop. How you doing, bud? And there's nothing that I read here that says that I need to directly respond to you. If you wanted to write something like that, I will be pausing occasionally and try to address you directly. And I think that's a really good idea because everyone's brain is a little bit different and thinks a little bit different and needs answered a little bit differently. And I'd like to respect you that much. I have to look over these numerical assignments. This is the next verse, no matter what the numerical assignment written right there is, which is just obviously wrong. Maybe that's supposed to be 3-7 or something. So angels alter their genetics to make mankind, or why we're a little lower than the angels. This break does not exist. It's not a separate chapter in the original text, but I feel it's a different topic. It should be a different chapter. And the Jehovah angels formed mankind of the pulverized debris. It does not actually read dust of the earth. That's completely the wrong idea. We are not made of dust, but to say that we are formed of pulverized debris might mean something a lot more important. Pulverized debris from the existent Adam, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life through a woman in birth pangs, and mankind became a fully living soul. And the Jehovah angels had planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there they emplaced the man whom they had formed. That is, there was no man to till the earth. You remember that. And that means that the planet was developed and there were no human beings on it. There were other animals on it and plants. In fact, in the order that science says those things occurred is what the Bible says, the order in which they occurred or were put here, actually. So, and out of the ground made the Jehovah angels to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. That is stuff for us, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I guess if it doesn't soon go over and I don't recall definition of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and also the tree of life, then I'll just ad lib it and talk about it. And a radiant flood of waters went out into Eden delight of Jehovah, to refresh the garden eastward. And from there it was parted and became into four principles. Here we're going to get into the description of the Garden of Eden. The name of the first principle was called scattered increase, that which will be returned of the whole land of the travailing circle, where there is shimmering water and fair weather. And by the way, the word circle there would have included the idea of a sphere. And the shimmering water and fair weather of that land is good. It is a pearl divided, and there are pale family building blocks. And the name of the second principle is called bursting forth to draw up, the same that encapsulates the whole land of those in darkness. And the name of the third principle is called rapidly ancients. Rapidly, ancients went eastward and took a successful step. And the fourth principle is the breaking forth in fruitfulness. Now, if you remember this from the text, this came out as Pishon, Heshon, Tigris, Euphrates, Hiddekel, etc. Egypt is the way it came out. But the Hebrew words that are in the most original text, the translators thought were referring to those things, but they had actual names for those places. And these could be at best called nicknames in the Hebrew, but here is the literal translation of that. So I'm going to put those together for you and categorize them by different kinds of ideas. Category one, ideas of location, like ideas like scattered increase, travailing circle, pearl divided. Ideas of future acts of angels, bursting forth to draw up. Rapidly, ancients went eastward and took a successful step. Also, there's ideas of what exists in the place being described. What exists there is shimmering water, fair weather, pale family building blocks, those in darkness breaking forth in fruitfulness. Now, if you can think of another place that fits these descriptions, well, you're a more creative person than I am. But I think it works well to describe this earth and this earth alone and in its present state. So I think the reason that people can't find the Garden of Eden where it's located is because they're not actually reading the text. They're not reading what it says. Because it's not describing a place on the earth, it's describing the entirety of the earth. Let me pause right there, see if there's anything comments that need taken care of. Do Jehovah's angels eat food? Yes. They have a physical place to stay. They are able to act on reality. I thought about writing a short book about just that, just kind of a pamphlet about that. I was going to call it Godspeed and Pooped. I think that would be a good name. Peace and respect, Dwayne Burke. Yes, there's nothing in the text that even suggests that Elohim or powerful beings or angels don't have physical self. There is a lot of evidence to say that they do have physical self, including where they come from is described in the book of Revelation. And that's pretty thorough as well. And the Jehovah angels took mankind and put him into the Garden of Eden to praise Jehovah and to keep the garden. And yes, that's extremely literal. I know it doesn't read that way in the King James. And the Jehovah angels declared of mankind, saying, of every tree of the garden thou may freely eat. But of the affixed tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die the death. Yes, in the original, it says die. It actually says that. In the King James, they completely left out the second word, death, where the Bible says leave out not one word. And they were both spiritually naked, the men and the women, and they were not ashamed. And then the story skips forward to the present. Now the snake nebula was more subtle than any sign of the zodiac, which Jehovah angels had established. And space spoke to women, saying, "Hey, have God said you will not be nourished of any established fact of the garden?" And the woman said to the snake nebula, "We may be nourished of all the established facts around the garden. But of the fruit of the tree in the midst of the garden, angels have said, you will not be nourished by it, neither will you even touch it, or yourself will die." And the snake nebula said to women, "You shall not surely die. Angels do know that in the day you are nourished from facts of good and evil, your eyes will be opened, and you will be as gods, knowing good and evil." And that fact is confirmed later in the text near the end of the story of the garden, after the curses. So this is very, very interesting to me. I recently found out that there have been women in NASA, etc., that have done like so much of the background work and allowed the male, I don't know, figureheads, face of NASA to go forward in science. Of course, we've all heard of the expression, behind every good man is a better woman. And I think that in this kind of thing where women have a tendency to motivate men, and on more than just science, by the way, I think that's just true of our nature. I sometimes jokingly say that if it weren't for the existence of women and that men just got fatter and split off and had a child, we wouldn't bathe. We would have invented TV and beer, and that's about it. And then women saw that the tree was good for nourishment and pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make wise. And she took of the fruit of it and was nourished, and motivated also man with her, and he was nourished. And the spiritual eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed split-leafed and spiny-backed fig leaves together and made themselves poor aprons. And they heard the audible voice of Jehovah's angels walking in the garden at the end of the 6th day. And men and women hid themselves from the presence of Jehovah angels among the trees of the garden, and among other things as well. If you were to look up Luke 23:30, Hebrews 11:38, and Revelation 6:15 through 16, you would find that it is well described our reaction to seeing heaven. And the Jehovah angels called to mankind and said, "Where are you?" And mankind said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was ignorant, and I hid myself." And angels said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you now eaten of the tree that I declared you could not eat of under your own accord?" I think this is actually a little bit tongue-in-cheek right here. It kind of makes me chuckle a little bit when I read, "Have you eaten of the tree that I declared you could not eat of under your own accord?" Obviously, if heaven arrived to the earth, we would stop asking certain questions about the truth and reality of existence. Like, we would not ask the question, are we alone in the universe? That would be a non-question. Do other, life forms exist? That's a non-question at that point. And once they establish themselves as angels, well, there'll just be a lot that won't be worth asking anymore. And mankind said to woman, mankind said, "Women who you gave to be with me motivated me to be nourished of knowledge, and I was nourished." And the Jehovah angels said to the women, "What is this you have done?" And women said, "The snake nebula and all of space tempted me, and I did become nourished of knowledge." And the Jehovah Angels had described the Snake Nebula in a book and wrote of it, saying, because you have done this, you are made a curse above all the Taurus constellation and above all of the zodiac. On your belly you will crawl, and dust is in your mouth all the days of your life. And I have put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seeds and her seed will bruise your head, and you will bruise its heel. Referring to the serpent, the word seeds right here means little granular things. And referring to the female seed right here means carnal offspring. Just so you know. And yes, it is true that the Snake Nebula is more subtle or harder to discern than any of the zodiac, beast of the field. And that is because of its literal enmity or distance between it and us. And without women prodding men toward recent technology, we could not have discovered the Snake Nebula. And it's showing the word is preserved and that there is hidden manna. I think that this is definitely evidence, if a person is willing to accept this as evidence, that human beings could not have written this text. Human beings on this earth cannot have written this text when it includes a perfect description of a nebula that we recently found. It is at that location. It's within the 30 degrees of Taurus. It is above the plane of the Milky Way, about 20 degrees. It is very subtle. It does look so much like a serpent that scientists call it the Snake Nebula. I didn't name it. And it does have stars in the appearance of the middle of the snake, like little seeds. It even has one from this angle, which is appropriate to the location of an eye of a snake in the correct place, and a little bit bigger and brighter than the other stars in it. So it really does look like a snake. And I think it takes some pareidolia, but not much, to see at the end of the Snake Nebula, at the tail of it, to see a reverse spade shape. Although it's not black, it's darker than the rest of the cloud. And also backward facing ears, like a traditional serpent would have, I think can be perceived in it fairly easily. I don't think it takes much imagination at all. I'm not really good at imagination. And checking. Okay, direct questions. So the Jehovah Angels have metabolism? Yes, they absolutely would, Iron. Do the Jehovah Angels have a reproductive system? They were able to reproduce with us. We are close enough in sperm versus egg that the enzyme lock on the outside of an ovum and the enzyme unlocker at the head of a sperm worked, causing pregnancy. So apparently, yes, they not only have a reproductive system, but we are interbreedable. Does Jehovah equal Yahweh? Well, YHVH is apparently a way for the text to refer to God. Now, God is a set of ideals. Those ideals in the order given: wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, respectful fear, power, and conservation. So YHVH is a set of ideals, whereas Yahovah is a different way to write that so that you can say it. So that they are equivalent, but they don't mean a being. So I want to be clear and say it doesn't mean a living being. It doesn't have personage. It's a set of spirits, which, yes, the Christians will greatly differ with me on that point, but that's what the text actually says of itself. So the promise or curse, by the way, the word curse in the Bible does not have a negative or positive connotation like it does in our modern lexicon. It only means the same thing as an intended promise, a future act that's agreed upon. Okay. For instance, there is one story in the Bible where two guys have an adjoining property line, and they're pretty much getting ready to go to war and like kill each other. And they start cursing each other, or they start yelling at each other. Sorry, they weren't cursing. They're yelling at each other, and they start yelling at each other in the name of God. And then they both use the same name of God. And then they go, wait a minute, you're a worshiper of Yahweh? And the other one goes, yes, and you are too. That's amazing. Why are we fighting? And they quote unquote curse each other and build an altar and meet there once a year to praise God. But the text literally says curse each other. So it's only a future promise act. It doesn't have a connotation of negativity, positivity, like the way we use it. So bear that in mind when the text says curse. To the woman, angels said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow in your pregnancies. In sorrow, you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will be a governor to you. I think rule over, when the majorative view of the actual word is govern over, not rule over. It doesn't say that he's king of her. It says more like attendant, governor. It's ideas of caregiving. It's not ideas of oppression, just so that females know that. And by the way, if you're a female accepting oppression in your church, in your Christian church, because of lines like that, I'd go and look up those words, because your males are misusing the actual words of the text, and you are not bothering to fact check them. Okay, I'd like to point something out about this. When angels are informing women of this, in order that those that have died are restored, they will have to be, quote unquote, born again. That's why the term born again exists in the text. There's even a line where someone says, what am I to do? Crawl back in my mother's womb? Well, no, actually, no. But if we could isolate all of the genetics that made you in the first place, and supplant the genetics in a viable ovum, and placed that carefully on a clot and let it do what it does, we would perfectly reproduce you. This is what's being described in the text. Also, I'd like to point out, if the threat on Eve or women is that they will have their births greatly multiplied in sorrow, it's not as the Christians read. It says it twice, that the births are being multiplied and the sorrow is multiplied because of that. It's not that it hurts worse than it used to. And I'd like to point out that if Eve, as many Christians maintain, had no children in the Garden of Eden, then God just promised to multiply 0. Now, I'm not the best at math, but from what I understand of math, if I take 0 and I multiply that by any integer, I'm going to get 0. Which means if you threatened to multiply 0 births, you just threatened nothing. So this is one of the ways that Christians assert that God is an idiot. And I don't appreciate that. I find that I get a little bit defensive for him about that. I don't think God is stupid. And if your God is stupid, stop worshiping it. Let's scoot. Oh, I just said all that. All right. Okay. Check back with comments. Christian religion poisons everything. That's a direct quote from, my goodness, his name escapes me. His brother's name is Richard. His name is Christopher. Christopher Hitchens. There we go. And a pretty decent quote there. Where are we at in time? Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, we're about 35 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to just kind of shoot the breeze for a minute, guys, and give you a chance to write anything into the side chat that you want directly addressed, and I will do that for you in the best that I can. Please use a lot of spaces. I don't mean blank spaces. I mean, flush out what you're trying to say, because you might think I'm smarter than I am, and I want it to be easy. Okay. So please flush out your question if you have any question. I would appreciate that. All right. Get the camera unfuzzied again. And I'm going to give you guys just a few minutes. Okay, so I think that there's some really major points that are hit here, and they're going to be further fleshed out throughout the Bible. That there is the idea in Genesis 1 of us eating just anything we find that doesn't kill us. Of us, well, that's odd. Of us being made physically out of existent material that was pulverized, which came from Adam. And then when Eve was made, reproducing in a very predictable and normal fashion, they had children, and lots of them. And they continued to have children so much that, and they apparently don't age. They don't have a shortage of telomerase to be perfectly self-repairing, as I believe we were intended to be, as 30 some odd animals on this planet already are. That it's within our genetic material, according to the genome and ENCODE projects, that we could make more telomerase. It's simply locked up. We actually could stop aging if our genetics were all coding, were all being used. I'll say it that way. I don't know all the technical terms. So then, the possibility of us living forever is literally locked away in us. That's a real thing. In fact, according to Science Magazine, September issue 2016, the United Nations dumping millions and millions and millions of dollars into laboratories around the world trying to unlock the human genome, say that they'll have it accomplished. I think it was page 51. Say that they'll have it accomplished by the year 2026, which, count them 5 years from now, we should have the human genome unlocked. And I could go into why our governments are always pushing for thinking green and limiting population and everything like that, because there's obvious repercussions to human beings living forever. Iron Charioteer writes, so are the Jehovah Angels responsible for chromosome number 2 fusion? No. You missed the beginning of the show. Number 2 chromosome fusion was an experiment by powerful beings that are described as being jealous and ill-intending. Those same kind of very powerful beings that are not very nice are also the ones who made Adam, because there's more than one way to use the word Elohim. It could mean negative powerful beings, and in the creation of Adam it does. So you might not like the idea that evolution happened somewhere and what we have is samplings that were given to the first human being, and that first human being brought them here, which is why we have only samples and not a full chain. But on the original planet where it happened would be a full chain, fossils of every variation in very, very small incremental steps, as Darwin expected there to be, as we all expected there to be, and there wasn't. But instead what we find is jumps between sets of bones. And we can put them together and say this is a lineage, and that's fine. And we can look at it genetically and definitely see the lineage like you're referring to there in chromosome 2. But that fusion was apparently an experiment by a technologically advanced group of beings who do not have your best intent in mind. Later in the Bible, they are called Egyptians, and they are the slave keepers. Okay, so that's the powerful beings, colloquially expressed later on in the story. That whole idea of Pharaoh, which means someone who does dividing, a divider, and the idea of the Egyptians, which means different from the Jew, different from the believer, different from the kind that came from Adam, different from that. These Egyptians are pretty crafty, but they're not nice. What genes did they edit? They created the iron. If you look, they didn't alter any of the genetics. That's kind of the wrong idea. They put a limit on what's expressed. If you look up junk DNA, you'll see the limit that was put on us that is not in angels. You'll see that limiter, and you'll see exactly what's limited if you look that up, okay? We are a lot of potential unrealized right now. If that potential were realized and we were able to, quote unquote, you could say evolve, it's a fair way to say it, because it would physically change you if it was released in you. And yes, you have that potential in you already. That is to say, the kingdom of God, the promises of the kingdom of God are within you. That's a line from the Bible, is true. That we have a lot of genetic potential that is not active right now. That's what's being promised will be released in us, and the difference between mankind and angels, and why we're a little lower than angels. Not much lower, but a little lower than angels. You got anything else, Iron? So another major topic that we just covered, aside from us being literally of the genetic material of angels, that material was pulverized and or powdered. You could say powdered, but that's not the right way to think of it, because you can't let it get dry. It was pulverized and used to create a very, very specific kind of being out of the angelic genetic material. And especially, I'm very persuaded that that's accurate, especially since because of that, I found out about junk DNA and what that means, and that we have a lot of potential in us. Peace and respect be. And so I think that's what the story is actually talking about. Of course, I didn't do that because of my bias. I saw that in the story, and then I went to science to see if that was true. And I found out that science had already discovered it years ago, and now because of ENCODE and genome, they know exactly what's there. So that's very confirming for me. Okay. Oh, I didn't know you guys know each other. That's sweet. Now, Iron may not be of this opinion, but I actually like Iron, and has made some good arguments. Just the name itself, Iron Charioteer, is a reference to a biblical story saying that Yahweh could not overcome a certain people because they had iron, chariots of iron. So I like the reference. I like bringing up the point. I like showing that infallibility is part of the resume. Is not part of the resume, even though Christians claim it. Oh, okay, cool. All right. B, if you have anything you want to throw into the side chat in the form of a question, I'd be happy to answer it for you in front of everyone. Perhaps you can summarize something that you think is worth saying that a group of agnostic, atheists, skeptics, etc. might write. I know you get to take advantage of me whenever you want, but I would trust you on your syllabus of that kind of a question and try to answer it for everyone. Let's see what else is promised in what we just read. The release of our genetic material, making us literal angels. That there's physicality of heaven, physicality of angels. Human beings existed in heaven before they were ever on this earth, and that means that the first generation must have been sworn to secrecy. They knew where they came from. So when we go back in the human genetics and the Homo sapiens sapiens genetics, and we find that bottleneck, there's a description of the bottleneck in the Bible, saying that what they did was they took genetically isolated subgroups of themselves and put them onto this earth and on different land masses. How far are you into your translation? I'm presently, let me check that. Presently at Genesis 17:2. I wanted to kind of, get ahead a little bit so that I don't overrun it. Yes, heaven has a certain number of doors, but the word doors right there means an entryway or a way to enter into. Okay. And that's why the doors are each made of one pearl, which is why you hear it colloquially called the pearly gates. But pearly gates doesn't mean two gates made of pearl side by side. It means 12 separate, each of its own individual pearl. And then if you look into the etymology of the words door, gate, pearl, and stuff like that in that part of the text, it means an angel. It means there'll be 12 angels doing the judgment. That is judging to see whether or not a person is a giant, a genetic defect, not Homo sapiens sapien. And the only way to fail being measured for sin is to not be a Homo sapiens sapien, which, weird enough, I know that you'll probably think I'm crazy for saying this, there's going to be some failures. Know thyself is an ancient Gnostic teaching. When Jesus said the kingdom is within, I think that's what he meant, know thyself. Iron, you can think that all you want. And all you just said is, I didn't look up the words. That's all you just said to me. If you looked up the words, you would no longer think that's what it meant. Love you, but you didn't look. Introspection is great. I try to look at myself seriously. I encourage other people to tell me things about me that I seem to be unaware of, because I'm in me, and it's hard to be outside of me looking at me when I'm in me. In fact, if you want to say something critique-ish, I'd be happy to hear it. Maybe you can make me a better person. Anything else, guys? Stick it in there real quick, or I'm just going to fold this thing and put a bow on it and send it out the mail. Okay. So I thank you all for showing up. Appearing in the side chat tonight was Kevin Chaos and Iron, and of course B. And Mac showed up. Nice to see him supporting, and also Paul Camish. And Junk Shop Library dropped by for a minute, which was very nice of him. Or they. Nice of them. I don't know how to say that. I'm stupid. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mail it. Peace and respect to you all. I want you all to know that I truly do look forward to the day that we're all great friends. And by that, I mean we'll all be in heaven together, just so you know.